All right, today we're going to talk about absolute monarchs in Europe. That puzzle here on the era of absolutism. This is one of your assignments, and just check it out. It's a good video. So, what is absolutism? It's a period of time in Europe where monarchs got stronger and stronger. Monarchs ruled with absolute power, and what gave them this power was the divine right theory. Underline this as a major concept you need to know. It's the idea that God had chosen a monarch to rule. It comes off of predestination. Remember John Calvin from Switzerland? Calvinism. God knows everything. God knows what's going on now. He's everywhere, and he knows how the world's going to end. Predestination. So if God knows how the world's going to end, and he knows everything in the future, well, he knew that I was going to become king, and he knew I was going to do all these good or bad things. So it's called the divine right of theory. It's based off of Calvinism, or it's based off of predestination. So everybody believes the theory during this period of time, including the poor people, peasants, and all this good stuff. So if you question the king, it's like questioning God. Strengths of absolute monarchies. It's efficient. Decisions are made by one person. Nationalism promotes a common culture, a common identity. Stability, the ruler stays in power until death. So there's no changing power, no getting used to a new ruler or anything. This dude or this lady's in power until they die. Wealth, there's no resistance, means there's a large and powerful empire. So here's some weaknesses you need to know about. It's undemocratic. There's no collaboration of ideas. Individual rights, they're often violated. What we call individual rights, human rights today, they're often violated, especially if you're a peasant, if you're a lower down on the social hierarchy, and they're often violated. Stability, if the ruler's poor, it could affect the country for decades. How to achieve more power? Monarchs gain power generally in one of two ways, either raising taxes, which increase their overall wealth and treasuries, and waging war, plundering the people you beat. You plunder them, take their loot, and makes you richer. So we're going to talk about Spain first, and I'm going to kind of cruise through these. So if you need to get your notes on the PowerPoint, that's fine. But King Philip, if you look here, you know he fought to protect Catholicism. His army reached about 50,000. So Spain's golden age is called El Greco. Expressed the deep Catholic faith in Spain. Diego Velázquez reflected pride in Spanish monarchy, and Miguel de Cervantes wrote Don Quixote. Here you go. So here's the fall of Spanish Empire, inflation and taxes. Spain suffered from severe economic decline. Wars cost Spain a lot of money, and they end up having to declare bankruptcy. And remember, Spain also had wealth from, as of 1521, they had wealth coming from the New World, the Aztecs. So they were the richest nation, and then they ended up having to declare bankruptcy because they spent a lot of money. France, religious wars and power struggles. As you see here, Henry of Navarone, he converts to Catholicism. He survives the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre of the Huguenots. Huguenot is the French word for Protestant. The Edict of Nantes, you need to put a star by that because it basically allows Catholics and Huguenots to live in peace. It happens in 1598. As you see here, Louis XIII comes to power after Henry dies, and Cardinal Richelieu is going to end up running the nation because Louis XIII's weak. Cardinal Richelieu moves against Protestants again, and he weakens nobles' power and relies on the middle class instead. If you weaken nobles' power, kings like to weaken nobles' power because nobles can challenge a king, and so the cardinal did the same thing. There's a picture of 13th and Louis XIII and Richelieu. Louis XIV comes to power. He is an important figure in world history. You need to know about him. He's not the true leader until he's about 23 years old. In 1661, Cardinal Mazarin ran the country until then. Louis weakens nobles' authority as well, excluded nobles from his council. Economic growth, as you see, Jean-Baptiste Colbert gave tax benefits to companies, and he was a believer in mercantilism and self-sufficiency. So Louis is going to spend a lot of his money on his personal life, servants and food, etc. He built this huge palace about 5 miles outside of Paris, and it's Versailles. It's famous. You can go visit it today. We got some pictures in here of it. I think it's a 5-acre palace on 36 acres of land, I believe, something like that. Louis controls the nobility, as you see. He forced nobles to be at the palace with him. Basically, if you've probably heard the statement, if you keep your friends closer and your enemies closer, kind of thing. He makes them dependent on the king, and he forces them from their homes to his palace. Louis is a huge patron of the arts. So there's Louis. Don't let the high heels fool you. Don't let the tights fool you. He was the most powerful man in Europe at this time. He gets the nickname, or he gives himself the nickname, the Sun King. Here's the Palace of Versailles. This is where the treaty was signed at the end of World War I. It's a famous palace, and as you can tell, it is quite grand. By the way, this is one of Louis' bedrooms. He had different bedrooms. That's the bed, and this is where his government officials would be. His top officials would be here, and he often conducted the business of state in his bed. In other words, he did government business in his bed, sometimes eating food. Louis fights, of course, disastrous wars. Most of his time as king, he spent at war. France had 4 times the population of England in 1660. They gained territory in the Netherlands through war. A European alliance helped to stop French aggression and expansion. The wars are going to cost France a tremendous amount of money. And here's the war they're going to stop. The Fourth War, France was about bankrupt. France was not in financially good statement, and actually the most costly war is going to be the Fourth War, from 1701 to 1714, and basically it's fought over the possible unification of France and Spain under one monarch. Louis XIV wanted to rule Spain as well. So as you see, France and Spain versus England, the Holy Roman Empire, and the Netherlands, basically. This ends in the Treaty of Utrecht. The thrones of Spain and France remained separate. However, Louis's grandson became King of Spain. So England gained a colony and greater access to the Atlantic slave trade out of this war. Here's his death. Here's his positive. Louis' positive influence. France was much more powerful at the top of art and literature. France was the military leader of Europe. The negative is constant warfare and construction. They're deep in debt and an unfair tax system. So, 30 Years' War. Basically, it's fought between Protestants and Catholics and the Holy Roman Empire. It basically happens when Protestant reformers push a Catholic government official out of a castle window, and the thing starts. But as you see, guys, this thing's going to go on for about 30 years, and it's fought over religion, but there's going to be a lot of political influence in this thing. So you read through this, and we're moving on. You need to know the peace at Westphalia. This will be on your test. At the end of the 30 Years' War, the Habsburgs of Spain and Austria were weakened. France was strengthened. Religious wars in Europe ended. German princes were independent of the Holy Roman Empire. Peace negotiations to end the war started, and as you see, it's the beginning of modern day states. It ended the idea of a Catholic empire throughout Europe. So, economic contrast with the West. In Eastern and Central Europe, serfdom is still strong in Eastern Europe. You have some older, weaker empires here. The Holy Roman Empire is getting ready to fall. The Ottoman Empire is weakening, but it's going to be around for a few hundred more years. And the rise of the Austrian Prussian empires come from the demise of the Holy Roman Empire. So, as it says here, Austria grows stronger. Read through this. And Maria Theresa inherits the throne. This is her. Moving on. So, the rise of Prussia. Prussia became a rigidly controlled, highly militarized society. Guys, a lot of Germany, because Prussia is in northeastern Germany today, and a lot of Germany's great generals, all except for Erwin Rommel, all of or most of Germany's great generals come from the old Prussian area. That's where their birthplace was. Great generals and statisticians there. Frederick the Great, read through him. So, the War of Austrian Succession, you see here, this is a war between Prussia and Austria in 1740. Fought to control Sicilia, iron and textiles. France helped Prussia. England helped Austria. As you see, Prussia wins. So the 7 Years' War, guys. This is the French and Indian War in U.S. history. I'm not going to talk much about it in world history, but we will more in U.S. and civics. 1756, Frederick attacked the Austrian ally, beginning the war in Europe. And the war did not change any European territory. All it did was France will lose all of its colonies in North America, India, to Britain. So, some Russian history here. Economically, still heavily reliant on servants as serfdom. My bad. Socially, the Mongols kept Russia isolated from the Renaissance and the Age of Exploration. Geographically, Russia to this day, they don't have many ports. They freeze over. They have them in the southern part of the nation. The size of Russia is a problem because it's huge. And as you see, Europe, Catholic and Protestant. What is Russia? They're Eastern Orthodox Christians. So the first Tsar will be Ivan IV, or Ivan the Terrible. Tsar is a Russian word for Caesar. He comes to power in 1533. He took over the nobles and he's going to weaken them and kill them. He rules Batara as a police state organized to track down and murder traitors to Ivan. As you see, he kills many nobles and he gave land to more loyal noble families. So Peter the Great's going to come to power in 1689 in Russia. He's known as Peter the Great because he wanted to learn about European customs and manufacturing techniques of Western Europe and of North America and really of Western Europe. And here you go. He's a reformer. Russian Orthodox Church was under state control, reduced the power of nobles and landowners, hired European military officers. He westernizes Russia. He introduces potatoes, women's status increases, nobles had to give up traditional dress. He advances education, establishes St. Petersburg as a city. He wanted to establish a seaport. He wanted to make it easier to get to Europe. He wanted a warm water port so it wouldn't freeze, so they could ship year-round and trade year-round. He built St. Petersburg on a swamp. As you see here, about 100,000 people died building the city. It became a very important port city to this day. We'll pick up with the English Reformation on the next part.